Hi, Sue. I'm not hearing you for some reason.
Let's do
There you
this
go.
over. Hey. So, welcome to another episode of Training is a Business Driver. I'm Susan Gaddy, your host, and I brought with me a good friend of mine, Julia Hickman. Julia, say hello.
Hi, everybody. So happy to be here.
So good. So Julie and I have known each other for many years now, but she does something really unique and special that a lot of small business owners, I think, would be really interested to hear about. So she's a podcast specialist. And if you're thinking out there, I don't know, podcast for me, too much work, blah, 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 we're going to bring in this concept of how to use a podcast as a way to make meaningful connections online. Because here's the truth about how business gets done. Always, first and foremost, always, right? Business gets done through meaningful connections. That's the top of your funnel. That's where everything happens. So, your ability to go out, right, and meet people, have engaging conversations. Listen, they don't want to be sold to, they want to get to know you, they want to have relationships and build really good connections. And in the past, the easiest way to do that was networking, events, you know, that dried up, as we all know, in the pandemic, but it's only partially back. I belong to a lot of networking groups, and we notice like our meetings are way down. Right there's still people that don't want to come out. I think there's people that will really never come back, and I don't believe people are willing to drive in a way that they would have before. The value really has to be there. So it's really imperative for professional services business owners to get even more comfortable with this crazy online internet world, which is why I have Julia Hickman with me, because podcasts and hosting a podcast are an amazing way to do that. So, Julia, I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk to people a little bit about the value and why podcasting is so important for their business.
Yes. First of all, Sue, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm very
You're
excited to come on
welcome.
and chat all things podcasts today because I feel like things are just getting more and more exciting in the podcasting world, and we
Agreed.
have to talk about it. So I want
Yeah.
to share a few nerdy stats with everybody just to kind of like give you an idea as to why podcasting is such a hot marketing tool. But 197 million Americans have listened to a podcast. Out of those 144 million people, it's people over the age of 12 that are listening to podcasts. So, there's podcasts for kids, but we're talking about like a large majority of these people are people that are probably like a potential client or customer for somebody. 32% of Americans listen to podcasts at least monthly, which means they are regular consumers of the content that is out there. And lastly, let's share the stat that 61.1 million American families are fans of music podcasts. Okay, not really what we care about, but 74% of podcast users listen to podcasts to learn something new. This one is a big one. So a big majority of people that are looking for podcasts, they're listening because they want to learn about a particular thing. They're trying to get some kind of problem solved by listening to a podcast.
That is so dead on, right?
Yeah.
So, and tell me, what was the stat on that again? I'm just putting some things in the comments.
Yeah, that was 74% of podcast listeners.
Listen to learn. Ha!
Listen to
And
learn.
what better thing do you want to be, right, than the expert that has the answers to the biggest questions that your people are asking? How amazing is that? Right? It's almost that thing where you don't even need to sell yourself. You just provide the information that people are looking for. And if they believe you're the right one for them, they'll take the relationship even deeper, or even better, that you become known as that person and you start getting that referral, right? So it works both ways. So podcast works both ways. I didn't realize that number was 74%. That number is huge.
Yeah.
Huge, huge, huge. Julia, I know I consider this weekly live show my version of a podcast. So I don't have all of the things that go into making a traditional podcast that you would find on Apple or something like that. I always found that to be a little overwhelming. probably too much work for me alone, right? So, why don't you talk a little bit about how, people like me could, utilize podcasts maybe in a slightly different way that's not so time consuming, or, some of the other things that people feel about podcasts.
Sure. So let me kind of talk about the traditional podcast first, and then I can show the different other ideas that someone
Love
can
that.
use podcasts for. So the typical podcast that most people probably know is the weekly show where the expert, the podcast host, has a day of the week where they share where their new episode comes out, right? So it's usually once a week, same day, and it's either a solo episode or maybe it's an interview with another expert, and it's kind of like revolves around a certain topic that they're teaching or they're talking about, and occasionally you might hear this podcast host invite people to a master class or to a challenge or to some kind of conversion event. So in this situation, what happens is the podcaster is using their podcast as a funnel into their program or their service, right? And this is great. This is a great way of marketing yourself because you're putting out weekly content, people are consuming it. Again, we know that people are probably listening because they want to learn about what that person is teaching on. So
Right.
it's an engaged audience.
Yeah.
Podcaster doesn't have to fight for, it's not like it's on Facebook where they're listening, but they might get, you know, they might get distracted by some ad or some comment or whatever. It's
Yeah.
podcast. They literally have this person in their ears, and it's like an intimate thing. It's a very intimate way of like consuming that content.
I'm a huge podcast consumer for all of those reasons. And my number one place for listening to podcasts are when I'm running. So,
Yes.
I run a little bit longer distances and I can only really listen to music so long. It doesn't really hold my attention. So I have like my favorite people that are talking about topics that I love, that are really interesting. And I always end up taking away really great points from them. And, in my ears, as a matter of fact, I laugh all the time because I text myself things while I'm like literally running and
Love that.
texting myself like things that are really interesting that I want to remember. So I'm exactly that type of consumer,
Yes.
using podcasts in that way.
Yeah.
And I'm completely a captive audience, as opposed to if I'm on my, in a live stream like this, we have people popping in and out, you don't know, they're not really catching it from the beginning. The continuity of it is very different than when someone listens to it. I'm curious if anyone's listening now or later on the replay, where do you listen to your podcasts? Do you have a favorite place, Julia? Where do you listen to your podcasts?
Same as you. I usually listen when I'm running or when I'm out walking with my daughter in the stroller.
Mhm.
Yeah, usually when I'm like doing some type of exercise is when I listen.
I
Um,
love it.
yeah, I know a lot of people listen when they're driving, but I don't really drive far distances
Me
normally.
either.
So yeah,
Yes.
I'm usually in the car for 5 minutes, and then so that's not long enough for me. But yeah, usually when I'm exercising is when I listen.
Okay, so if
So
I understood you correctly, a real benefit to having some sort of podcast that you might share with your audience is that, you know, you're building that reciprocity, you're giving them information, you're making it sort of fun and engaging and entertaining and something that they want to be a part of, instead of something that feels spammy, right? Awkward, uncomfortable, salesy, which is what I think most business professionals, at least the ones that I talk to, object the most about being on social media, right? They're
yeah,
like, I don't want to sell. Well, the truth is, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. You have this amazing, unique talent and know things probably more than 90% of the average audience doesn't. And you're simply sharing the things that are actually quite easy for you, which is a huge win-win. So I love that. I love all those why reasons.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And yeah, I can go a little bit deeper on that, but like usually the podcasters that have a captive audience are not the people who are like in every episode saying, oh, you have to sign up for my program, you have to sign up for my program, you have to buy my
Right.
service, you have to buy. No, they're giving value most of the time and then making an invitation to, get on a call or to sign up for some conversion event. So there's a key differentiator there, because I have followed some podcasts where it feels like, and like every 5 minutes they're trying to sell you something, and it's like, oh my God, this is so annoying.
You feel it, right? Like, you know what their intention is, and it's completely out of alignment to what they say they're doing. And it's a turnoff. It's a
Yeah.
real turnoff. I'm with
Yeah,
you. Yeah, I'm with
totally.
you.
So what some people say is, okay, this is great. I love it. I get it. Like, I get why having this like weekly show, or even like, let's say bi-monthly show, is a great way for me to grow my audience. Because yeah, like Sue's saying, like having a show on, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, it's great. You're kind of limited to your audience, right? It's whoever you're connected with is who might potentially see your content. But with a podcast, the the possibility of you reaching people is like pretty endless, because you can reach so many people all over the world. First of all, Apple Podcasts is really good about helping you get shown. I can talk a little bit deeper about that, but like having
Mhm.
ratings and reviews and downloads, all those things help the algorithm know that, okay, this is a show worth showing to more people, because people are like enjoying it.
Oh, I
So
love that. I didn't realize
um,
that. I didn't
yeah,
realize that to be
so
true.
definitely, it's definitely like it's very, very possible for people to kind of randomly find you. So that's one of the main things about podcasts that's different from just having like a video on social media. So I wanted to talk about the other ways that someone can use the podcast, which I know, Sue, you work with a lot of people that have more traditional businesses too, that are not necessarily online, who understand the value of having an online presence, but they either hate social media, or they don't really have the time to like understand it, and like, or even
Mhm.
to have somebody like deal with it for them, but they know that they need to be out there. And I feel like podcasting is um a great um opportunity for them, a great what's the word I'm trying to think of here? It's another possibility for them, another option for them is what I'm trying
Yeah.
to think of,
Yep.
instead of being on social media. So I'm not saying they shouldn't be on social media, they probably still should be, but they can kind of put more energy on podcasting than trying to just fight the algorithm and try to figure all the things out on social media.
Agreed.
And
Agreed. Yeah.
so what
It's this
someone
is such a great additional tool, right?
exactly,
Another way to make those meaningful connections. So, all right. So we know the
yeah,
traditional podcast. Hit us
yeah.
with some really cool stuff. What can people
So
do instead of a traditional podcast? Tell us a
yeah.
little bit about that.
So instead of a traditional podcast, what someone could do is literally have a a podcasting funnel. So they can have just a series of episodes that they share with their email list, or their, even like their clients. Like, I know some people have private podcasts for their clients, because it's just easier for their clients to consume that content. So for example, if someone has a course, and typically they have like a Kajabi, or, whatever site it is that the clients have to log into to access that course, a lot of people like forget their login, or, I've done it before where I've signed up for a course, and then after like a month or two, I'm like, oh, I don't even remember my password. Like, I forget it.
Mhm.
But if you give somebody a podcast, a private podcast, where they don't even have to log in, like they just have that in their on their phone, you make it so much easier for them to consume that content, because most likely they're already listening to podcasts, and now it's just, it's there, it's right there, and they can more easily access it.
I
So
love that
that's another
idea.
option
I love
too,
that
is just
idea. Yep.
having like content for your clients. So on the other hand, you can also have content for potential clients. So like an example that I can give you is you could have like a series of 5 to maybe 10 episodes where you walk people through what it might be like to work with you. So this is actually a great thing for someone who doesn't love getting on the phone for sales calls, because those podcast episodes can do the selling for you. And then maybe you just need to get on a call with someone like for clarity, like you're not selling them anymore. You're just kind of like clarifying a few things for them. So it's a great, great option. Another thing that I want to mention about podcasting that goes with all of these options, but with like the traditional podcast and like the free like podcast funnel, is that it's a great way, actually no, more for potential for the traditional podcasting, is that it's a great marketing tool. And I know that traditional business owners, they're big on referrals, they're big on relationships. So that's another selling point of the traditional podcast, is that you can invite guest experts. You can build relationships with them. So you can have anybody on your show that either you want to maybe collaborate with, that you may want to like hire, that, or maybe that you may want to have as a client, because that gives you, like, when you have that interview session with them, you're essentially having like this conversation. It's like, this coffee chat that you're having with them. You're talking about potential problems that either you or they can solve. It really is a great way to get to know them on a deeper level. And then after that session, you just continue the relationship. And then again, like Sue said, now they know who you are. So when they're ready to hire someone for that service,
Yep.
they're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to give Sue a call. I'm going to send her a message because now I'm ready to, invest.
I can actually share a real life story where that is a 1,000% true statement. So I was invited to be a podcast guest, which is great for me as a business owner. If you invite me, the answer is always yes. So anyone out there that would like to invite me to your podcast, I'd love to be on it. I'm sure Julia would as well, because this is how we become known to new audiences, right? It's always about, putting yourself out there in a way that other people just get to know you. And so I always say yes, especially if we serve the same audience, because I want to get in front of, my ideal audience as well. So I met this gentleman. He's got this great company. It's not anything I would have ever said I needed. It's not anything I would have ever gone looking for. And if I read like his profile or title, I would have been like, I don't even know what that means. Right. But so he invites me on the show, and here, like, we have the pre-conversation, and actually what he does is perfect for me. Now, I don't need it today. I'm not ready to make that investment, but when I am, I already know who I need. So, he doesn't, and it would be the easiest sale of his life, because I'm going to call him up and I'm going to say, I'm ready. And so I believe he's the expert. I know his product and service is the right one for me. We like did all of that pre-work. So, and not once did he offer me anything.
Yeah.
Not once.
Yeah. And that's key too. Yeah. You don't want to go on a podcast, or you don't want to invite someone on your podcast and like sell them on the spot, because that's just icky.
No, I've had the opposite happen, and you feel it. Like and I've gotten good enough now that I'll literally stop people and I will actually say, I think we're changing the scope and conversation of this call. This call was for us to talk about podcasting. I'm actually not here to learn about your services or to consider buying them. And it's just confusing me. That's actually what I say to people.
Love that. Love that.
You're confusing me, and it's not going to result in the thing that you're hoping that will happen. I said, so let's keep it at the podcast, and wherever it goes, it goes. So I actually feel that's like the kindest and nicest thing I could do for other people, because they don't know that when you bait and switch, right? When you bait and switch, that it automatically kills the relationship.
Totally.
Right? It kills anything that could have potentially happened. So I've been on both sides of it. And I've personally done it myself unknowingly. Like, this is one of those things you learn the hard way. Like, I'm like, and I'm thinking of another woman who I actually probably would have worked with her, but it was a coffee chat that all of a sudden she was coaching me and telling me something that I was doing wrong. And I was like,
Mm,
I don't even know what's happening here, but
yeah.
all of a sudden I have my back up and I'm in defensive mode. And now I don't feel good at all. So I think being really clear right in there is the best thing that you can do as the host, and be true to the goal. Remember, the intention here is meaningful connections. These are not,
Absolutely.
they're not marketing calls, they're not sales calls, right? They're a way to create meaningful connections, which is the top end of making sales in your business. So I love it. So you've
Absolutely.
given us, I'm going to do a quick recap because they've been so good, right? So we talked about the funnel, that you could create something and share it with your list, whether that's, current clients, right? Maybe onboarding clients. I can tell you with my corporate
Yeah.
audiences that we create training programs for, we do this in onboarding all the time. It's a phenomenal way to bring people into the organization in a way that's meaningful, that they want to hear. So that series works exceptionally well. I love this as a pre-sales,
Yeah.
right? So let's say somebody does book a discovery call with you. You can drip this out, right? And a lot of times people are like, "Oh, my people don't listen to this." They actually do. And we don't even need them to listen to the whole thing. Any little bit of information they get from you ahead of time is really just prepping them to be really prepared to have a very good conversation with you. Is there another one? I know we were like kind of veered off a little bit. So we did those two. Is there any other options that you wanted to share before we wrap up this part of the segment?
I think that was pretty much it. So basically, like you can either use it as content for, or I think that maybe that was the one that we missed. So you can have your course content
Oh, I love this too.
in a
Okay.
podcast. Yeah.
Well, I can really speak to this course content. I like to put this in just in the chat. So I'm going to do this really quick. So course content as a podcast versus a video. And I think you talked about a little of the value of that. Yes, I run courses for myself and everyone else. And, and the one thing, course owners come to me with like the hugest frustration point over and over and again are these little ticky tacky things, right? Honestly, Susan, if one more person asks me to reset their password, I'm gonna lose it, right? How
Yeah.
many emails do I have to send before somebody opens the damn thing? Like, these are real life conversations that I have with very successful course owners at all levels. And, it's really because this video is sort of a thing that we were all led to believe was like going to be the thing that everybody watched. But the stats on that are so sad. It's
Yeah.
92%. Only 92% of courses go unfinished, let alone even started. So this idea of giving people more is actually not true. Giving people less and making it easy to consume as a way to expand their knowledge before you get into more of a live training session is a solid option. There's a woman that I follow too. I can't even think of her name, but she did it on the back end of it. So this is sort of a front end option. What she did was she collected the most common sticking points that got in people's way after they learned a strategy she taught them. And so she created 5 minute, they're 5 minute, 10 minute, almost like tips podcasts. And so they went automatically out then to people. So if you learn topic A, you automatically got set up in sequence A, follow-up sequence A. So they were already solving the most common roadblocks to implementation without anybody even having to ask for it. How crazy cool is that?
Love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So, these are just some really amazing things that you can do with podcasts. So before we wrap up for the day, Julie, I'm so thankful for you to be sharing your expertise with us. This is what Julia does for a living. She helps many successful business owners to get an actual podcast up and running on iTunes where it's discoverable in the world. Do you want to share like 2 or 3 things that you've helped people to overcome, right? There's always the thing that gets in someone's way when they're doing about this. Can you share a couple of those typical barriers that if somebody's experiencing right now, you're not alone? There's always
Sure.
a lot of apprehension, fear, uncertainness, right? That we sometimes internalize as this is not for me. But what are the ones that you hear that people should know if they're feeling this? It's actually okay. It's actually expected.
Yeah. So a couple of things that people mention. One is the the fear. It's almost like that imposter feeling, right? So they
Mhm.
know that having a podcast, being a podcaster, is going to elevate them into that expert status in their industry, but they're like, I don't quite feel like that expert yet, so I'm feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome. And the thing about it is, you can't no one wakes up being an expert, right? Like, you become an expert by learning new things, by doing new things, by putting yourself around other people who know more than you, and by actually putting out your podcast and your content in your podcast and inviting guest experts to chat with. That is what's going to get you to that status that you're seeking. So it's when people say that, it's like, well, this is really why you have to do this podcast now, is because you want that status and you don't quite have it yet. Um, so that's one big thing. Another thing that I get is just kind of the overwhelm of like, oh my gosh, there's all these little pieces.
Mhm.
I don't know how I'll be able to keep up with this. What if I put out a few episodes and then I pod fade? So there's a term in the podcast
I love that.
business,
I've never
pod
heard that term before.
fading, where people put out, and I think there's even a stat where like people usually put out 7 episodes and then they stop because it just became too much. The creating the content, trying to do all the things themselves.
Mhm.
And little side note, we do that monthly management too, by the way.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's
So
a thing I would really want people to know because that's for real, right? You're running your business. This is, it's easy for you, Julie. You do this all the time. You have the equipment, you have the team, you have the experience. We make things exponentially hard on ourselves by trying to take on all the pieces. If you really want to do this, you really want to go all in and make this successful in your business, hire somebody that knows what they're doing and
right.
make it easy on you to be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important I'm the type of person who thinks that you should have a little bit of an understanding as to what something entails. So I'm never going to tell someone like, "Oh, don't even like try to learn anything about podcasting." I feel like if it's something that interests someone, they
Mhm.
should understand it a little bit. It doesn't mean that you need to know exactly how to edit up, what tools you need and what you need to do to edit your podcast, or how to write, an SEO friendly show notes and all that kind of stuff. But you have like a little bit of an understanding so that you can see the big picture. But it does not mean that you need to be the one doing it.
Right.
And it also doesn't mean that you need to throw it to your VA who might not know what they're doing either. So
Mhm.
it's
Yep.
important to find the right fit for someone to really handle that, because it really can be such a lucrative marketing tool in
Mhm.
whatever way you decide to use it, whether it's traditional podcasts or, like we said, more of like an evergreen short series that someone can use as a funnel. It's just important to be able to like really utilize that content, repurpose it. Like, that's also another big thing, is if you're spending all this time creating content, it's really, really beneficial to repurpose it, to just give
Mhm.
that content more life. That's just less work that you're going to do overall, because you don't have to start from scratch. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of repurposing as well.
I love it. Well, listen, you've given us some amazing things to think about today. I'm so appreciative of you sharing your time with us. listen, I think the things that's really stepping away from me is that, expertise is the way to open the door. Your expertise as a small business owner, things that 90% of the general population doesn't know. And that by you simply sharing those things in a really meaningful way is an exceptional way to open up the door to new connections. And that is the name of the game. And 74% of people are listening to learn, right? So they are looking for you. I think I took away these great, these great ideas: podcast as a funnel, right? A pre-sales podcast, even from an internal course perspective, are non-traditional ways to take advantage of the benefits of a traditional podcast. So let's wrap up with this. Definitely chime in at any time, whether you're watching this live or on the replay. What was the biggest takeaway from you? I'd love to hear that. What was the one aha moment from you? And how likely are you to be thinking about a podcast? And Julia, I'm going to turn it over to you. Where would people be able to connect with you if they decide that a podcast is the direction that they'd like to go? How can they learn a little bit more? Where can they find you? Give somebody a good way to get in touch with you.
Yeah, they can send me an email. I'm actually working on my own podcast funnel because I want to be able to send people.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that be great to show
where they
people
can
exactly?
Get like some of those the most common questions answered. But for now, people can just email me, and that is connect@juliahickmanandco.com. Or you can also find me on Facebook.
Hickman and A&D
co.com.
All right, I think I got it there. I'm going to put it up here as well. And I love that idea because I believe that so intellectually people can grasp the concepts, but it is a completely different experience when you personally have the opportunity to be led through it. So for you to create one as a great way for people to experience it, and then you have a model also that shows people a little bit more they're looking for. So Julia, thank you as always for sharing your expertise with me. I've really enjoyed our time together today. I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite podcast?
I do have a couple of podcasts. So one of my clients, she is a business and mindset mentor. So I listen to her I work on her podcast, so I listen to it.
You listen to that all the time.
It's called Literally, and I feel like it's great because she really dives into the mindset part, which I feel like there's so much strategy all over the place, but mindset, I feel like mindset that feels good to you is kind of hard to find. So I love Literally, it's called. And then I would say another one that's more like strategy is Kelly Roach's podcast.
Yes, that's a good one. That's been in my ear. Julie and I met through Kelly's program. I think you're still in it, right? Are you still in it?
Yes.
So I'm a graduate, proud graduate. I spent 2 years learning everything about growing a business online. I'm forever grateful to her. And she was probably a part of hundreds of miles in my ears. And I'll tell you who I'm listening to right now is Dax Shepard, the armchair expert. So I too am a huge fan of mindset. And Dax Shepard considers himself an armchair expert around mindset, and recovering alcoholics, speaks very openly and honestly about that. And he invites a lot of big hitters that have great books, people like Brene Brown, some really interesting people on there. So I feel like I get really interesting conversations and that dopamine hit of the mindset stuff that I love to hear. So that's my recommendation to anyone. And anyone watching, tell us, what's your favorite podcast? I really want to know. I'm always so interested to hear what people are liking and resonating with. And Julia, I will look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them and I'll circle back later to check them out.
Love it. Awesome. Then have a wonderful afternoon and we'll connect again soon. Bye.
Bye.